On the pitch, Manchester City is a masterpiece. They are a ruthless, beautiful machine designed to dominate every inch of grass in Europe. They don't just win, they suffocate their opponents. But if you leave the stadium and walk into the accounting department, the picture changes completely. Off the pitch, this club is accused of orchestrating the most sophisticated financial heist in the history of modern sports. The Premier League has pinned a specific number to this accusation, 115. That is not a clerical error. That is not a mistake. That is a dossier of alleged deception spanning 9 years. To put it simply, imagine winning the lottery, not once, but every single year for a decade. That is essentially what Manchester City's balance sheet looks like. The Premier League says this luck is actually a decade of systemic fraud. They allege the club cooked the books, inflated sponsorships, and paid managers under the table to bypass the rules designed to stop them. City says it's simply genius business management. But buried in a pile of leaked emails, there is a paper trail that suggests the entire dynasty might be built on a lie. And the evidence is overwhelming. We are talking about 30 million documents, secret contracts locked in safes in Abu Dhabi, emails discussing how to route cash through third parties to hide the source. This is not just a breach of rules, it is an alleged conspiracy to deceive the auditors, the league, and the fans. So, who's telling the truth? Is this a witch hunt against a new superpower, or is the greatest team of the Premier League era built on a foundation of illegal money? If they are innocent, they are the greatest business minds in football history. If they are guilty, we are looking at the relegation of a giant. I'm your auditor. Welcome to FC Business Global. Today, we ignore the tactics and open the files on the trial of the century.
To understand the 115 charges, you have to stop looking at the football pitch. You have to forget about Erling Haaland's goals. You have to forget about Kevin De Bruyne's assists. You even have to forget about Pep Guardiola's tactics. To understand this trial, you need to understand one boring corporate term: related party transactions. Let's go back to 2010. The landscape of European football was very different. The old guard, Manchester United, Real Madrid, Barcelona, were the kings. They were printing money. They sold millions of shirts from Tokyo to New York. Because they earned massive commercial revenue, they could afford to buy the best players in the world. Then, financial fair play, or FFP, was introduced. The rule was deceptively simple. You could only spend what you earn. The goal was to stop clubs from going bankrupt, but it had a side effect. It protected the elite. It pulled up the drawbridge. If you were a small club, you couldn't just spend £1 billion to catch up because you didn't have the revenue to justify it. You were trapped in mediocrity. Enter Manchester City. In 2010, they didn't have a century of history. They didn't have a global fan base. What they had was an owner with effectively unlimited pockets, Sheikh Mansour of Abu Dhabi. The problem for City was that Sheikh Mansour couldn't just write a personal check for £1 billion and deposit it into the club's account. Under FFP rules, that is illegal owner equity funding. It's financial doping. So, the Premier League alleges that City found a back door. They couldn't use owner money, so they allegedly disguise owner money as corporate revenue. Here is the pub logic explanation of the accusation. Imagine you were a teenager. You want to buy a Ferrari, but you only make $50 a week delivering newspapers. You clearly cannot afford the car. Now, imagine your father owns a massive construction empire. He wants you to have that Ferrari, but the bank, or in this case the Premier League, says he cannot just give you the cash. It's against the rules. So, your father comes up with a plan. His company hires you to mow the lawn, and for that service, he pays you $1 million. Technically, on paper, that is revenue. You earned it. You are now a highly profitable lawn mowing business, and you can legally buy the Ferrari. The Premier League alleges this is exactly what Manchester City did with their sponsors in Abu Dhabi. The accusation is that companies like Etihad Airways were not paying the full sponsorship money themselves. The allegation states that the owner, Sheikh Mansour, was secretly funding the sponsors, who then passed the money to the club. This isn't just a theory, it is based on leaked internal emails published by Der Spiegel. One specific email allegedly regarding the Etihad deal is damning. It suggests that out of a £67 million sponsorship deal, only £8 million actually came from the airline. The other £59 million allegedly came directly from the owner's private funds. If this is true, it changes everything. It means Manchester City artificially inflated their revenue streams. By making it look like they were earning hundreds of millions from commercial deals, they balanced their books. They made the club look profitable on paper, which gave them the legal cap space to go out and spend billions on the transfer market. They didn't break the rules of spending, they allegedly faked the income to justify the spending. They built a skyscraper of success, but the prosecution argues the foundation was made of phantom money.
But if inflating your income is the first step of the heist, the second step is perhaps even more dangerous. It involves making your expenses vanish into thin air. In the world of forensic accounting, we call this suppressing operating costs. But in the hallways of the Premier League, it is becoming known as the legend of the shadow squad. To understand this, you have to look at the balance sheet as a simple equation. Profit equals revenue minus expenses. We just discussed how City allegedly faked the revenue. Now we have to look at the expenses, specifically the wage bill. Between 2009 and 2013, Manchester City was arguably the most aggressive buyer of talent in the history of the sport. They weren't just buying players, they were buying an entire starting 11 of world-class superstars. Sergio Aguero, David Silva, Yaya Touré, Carlos Tevez. These are not cheap assets. These are players who command the highest salaries on the planet. Logic dictates that City's wage bill should have exploded. It should have skyrocketed past Manchester United, past Chelsea, and past Barcelona. But when the auditors looked at the official accounts submitted to the Premier League, the numbers looked surprisingly manageable. They were high, yes, but they weren't catastrophic. They stayed just within the safe zone of financial fair play. For years, analysts were baffled. How was City keeping their payrolls so efficient while signing the most expensive mercenaries in the world? The Premier League believes they have found the answer. They allege that the official contracts registered with the league were only half the story. The centerpiece of this accusation is the case of Roberto Mancini. Mancini was the man charged with delivering City's first Premier League title. He was a top-tier manager, and he expected a top-tier salary. According to the official documents Manchester City submitted to the FA and the Premier League, Mancini was paid a base salary of roughly £1.45 million per year. Now, pause for a second. Does that number sound right to you? £1.4 million for the manager of the richest project in football history? It was a healthy salary, sure, but it was significantly lower than his rivals. It was a bargain. The Premier League alleges that this contract was essentially a decoy. According to the leaked documents published by Der Spiegel, Roberto Mancini allegedly signed a second contract on the very same day, but this contract was not with Manchester City. It was with a completely different entity called Al Jazeera Sports Club. Here is where the geography becomes important. Al Jazeera is based in Abu Dhabi, and crucially, Al Jazeera is owned by Sheikh Mansour, the exact same owner as Manchester City. This second contract allegedly paid Mancini an additional £1.75 million per year. That is more than his official City salary. And what was he doing for this massive payout? The contract stated his role was to act as a special advisor to Al Jazeera. It required him to provide consultancy services for a club 4,000 miles away while he was busy managing a Premier League title race in England. The Premier League's argument is that this consultancy role was a sham. They allege it was a vehicle for disguised remuneration. Think about the mechanics of this. If Manchester City had paid Mancini his full value, let's say £3.2 million, that entire amount would sit on City's books as an expense. It would hurt their FFP calculation. It would reduce the amount of money they could spend on transfers. But by splitting the salary in two, City allegedly moved nearly 60% of the cost off their books entirely. The owner paid Mancini directly through a separate company. The money still went from Sheikh Mansour to Roberto Mancini, but it bypassed Manchester City's accounts completely. It became a ghost expense. If you do this once, it's a scandal. But the fear and the reason there are 115 charges is that this might have been a system. The shadow squad theory suggests this wasn't just about the manager. There are allegations concerning player image rights and third-party payments that followed similar structures. If these accusations are proven in court, the implications are devastating. It means that every single financial statement Manchester City signed off on during that period was false. It means they lied to the tax authorities. It means they lied to the Premier League. And most importantly, it means they fielded a team that they legally could not afford. They were playing with 12 men, 11 on the pitch, and one very creative accountant in the back office making the red flags disappear. This is the definition of a strict liability breach. You either declared the payments or you didn't. And if the emails are real, the paper trail for this shadow payroll doesn't just lead to a fine, it leads to the question of whether the titles won by that squad were bought with illicit cash.
So why is the number 115? It sounds excessive. It sounds impossible. How can one football club commit 115 separate crimes without being shut down immediately? To understand the scale, you have to realize that this isn't a list of 115 isolated incidents. It is a cascading failure. In the world of corporate compliance, when you lie about your income in year one, that is a charge. When you submit that same false account to the Premier League, that is a second charge. When you submit it to UEFA, that is a third charge. And when you refuse to hand over the email proving you did it, that is a fourth charge. Now, do that for 9 consecutive seasons. The math becomes exponential. The prosecution argues that City didn't just break a rule, they broke the entire operating system of the league year after year after year. But the most fascinating part of this dossier isn't the money, it's the cover-up. Roughly 30 of these charges are strictly for non-cooperation. Think about what that means. In 2018, the Premier League knocked on Manchester City's door and asked to see the hard drives. A normal club, terrified of the regulator, would have complied. Manchester City did not. They allegedly locked the doors. They redacted documents. They challenged the jurisdiction of the investigators. For 5 years, they tied the Premier League in knots. This is what legal experts call the strategy of attrition. If you cannot win on the facts, you win on the procedure. You delay, you appeal, you redact, you burn the clock until the investigation loses momentum. And to execute this strategy, City has hired an army. Leading the defense is Lord Panic KC. He is not a sports lawyer, he is a constitutional heavyweight. He is the man who advised Boris Johnson during Partygate. He is the man you call when you are fighting for your life against the state. His fee is rumoured to be anywhere between £5,000 and £10,000 per hour. To put that into perspective, Manchester City is currently spending more on their legal defence team than most championship clubs spend on their entire striker force. This is weaponized spending. City isn't just defending themselves, they are trying to bankrupt the prosecution's will to fight. So what is their defense? Beyond simply denying the fraud, they are relying on 2 powerful legal arguments. First, the time-barred argument. City's lawyers are arguing that many of these alleged breaches happened too long ago to be prosecuted. They are trying to apply a statute of limitations. If they succeed, they could wipe out half the charges, specifically the ones from the Mancini era, without ever having to prove they were innocent. They simply argue that the Premier League arrived too late to the crime scene. Second, the irregular evidence argument. The entire case originates from the Football Leaks dump provided by Rui Pinto, a Portuguese hacker. City argues that this evidence is fruit of the poisonous tree. It was obtained illegally, taken out of context and manipulated. They are asking the independent commission to throw out the smoking gun because it was stolen.
This turns the trial into a game of high-stakes chess. On one side, you have the Red Cartel, Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal. To them, City is the villain who bought their way to the top by cheating the system, inflating the market, and stealing trophies that belonged to historic clubs. On the other, City positions themselves as the disruptors. They believe this entire rulebook, financial fair play, was created by the establishment specifically to stop new owners from challenging the old hierarchy. They believe they are being punished not for cheating, but for winning. But make no mistake, the Premier League has staked its entire reputation on this case. This is a massive litigation risk. If the league loses, they look weak, incompetent, and powerless to stop state-backed entities. If they win, they have to destroy their biggest champion. There is no draw in this match. One side is going to suffer a catastrophic defeat, and right now, the lawyers are the only ones keeping the score.
We are currently in the quiet period. The independent commission is reviewing terabytes of data behind closed doors. So, as financial auditors, what are the likely outcomes of this trial? When you strip away the noise and look at the precedents, we are left with two very distinct timelines. The first is the slap on the wrist. This is the scenario where City's legal army wins the war of attrition. They manage to get the evidence from the emails thrown out. They successfully argue that the older charges are time-barred. The Commission is left with only the procedural charges, the non-cooperation. In this world, City gets hit with a fine. It could be massive, 50 million, maybe even 100 million pounds. To you and me, that is a fortune. But for a state-backed club, a fine is just a business expense. It is simply the cost of buying success. The titles stay in the cabinet. The status quo remains. The second scenario is the nuclear option. If the most serious charges are proven, specifically the hiding of owner funding and the shadow contracts, the Premier League cannot simply issue a fine. The precedent set by Everton and Nottingham Forest is clear. Financial breaches result in points deductions. But Everton breached the rules once. City is accused of breaching them continuously for a decade. If you apply the same math, a simple deduction isn't enough. We are looking at a deduction so large it guarantees relegation, or worse, total expulsion from the Football League. This would be the death penalty for a modern super club. It would trigger an immediate financial collapse. We would see asset fire sales, Erling Haaland sold to balance the books, Pep Guardiola walking away, sponsors activating reputational damage clauses to cancel their billion-dollar contracts. The dynasty would end overnight. The verdict is expected in 2025. Until that day comes, every trophy Manchester City lifts carries an invisible asterisk. In the game of billions, the best defense isn't a goalkeeper, it's a lawyer. Until that day comes, every trophy Manchester City lifts carries an invisible asterisk. In the game of billions, the best defense isn't a goalkeeper, it's a lawyer. If you want to understand the money behind the match, subscribe to FC Business Global. Next week, we audit Chelsea's billion-dollar gamble. You don't want to miss that. I'm your auditor. Class dismissed.